So let's do a small thing, even before we begin the session. Whenever I say Selenium, you have to say conf, okay? And it has to be loud. We should wake the next room as well. And maybe the police comes in half an hour, okay? Selenium! Oh, guys. We are in Chicago, the wind is louder than this. Selenium! Selenium! Testing! Yeah? So see, that is the point. We've come in the Selenium conference. Interestingly, 90% of the content that I've seen so far, and even over the years, has been testing oriented, right? So this session is all about how not to use Selenium for test automation. Oh, thank you. Okay. So first of all, boring stuff about me. I'm an AVP for engineering and innovation, fancy word for R&D at Provar. So we specialize in Salesforce test automation. It's a low-code, no-code test automation tool for Salesforce. I'm a mom, manager of managers at office, and a dad at home. Mentor at Plato and ADP list, maker at TestZeus. That's how I contribute to open source. So TestZeus is an open source framework for Salesforce test automation. Pretty awesome. I'm biased. I've made it. And last but not the least, I'm also an instructor at TAU, Test Automation University. That being said, even before we go into the main parts, first of all, super thanks to the organizer of the conference. Full credit goes to them for putting up this awesome effort together. Now, on that positive note, first of all, a quick Slido poll. You can pull up your smartphones, scan the QR code, and it has 3.5 options. What is the main purpose of using Selenium for you? Is it functional test automation, non-functional test automation, non-testing use cases, or maybe none of the above, right? We've downloaded it but never used it. Click an option. Hopefully, we should see results. Wow. Okay, so testing passed there. I think somebody responded. Everybody's saying functional test automation only. Is that the use case? Nobody is doing other stuff. Is it just me and my team? Maybe my ex-people? Some numbers, okay. Some sharing non-functional test automation. People remember, oh, that one JMeter script last year, right? Anything else? Web scrapers? No, nothing. Okay, non-testing use cases, 4%. Awesome. Super. Okay, none of the above. Okay, so we have participants who are awake and who actually use Selenium. It's not like, they just downloaded it or just visited the repo once. Super awesome. So see, that is why we did that small exercise in the beginning, right? Selenium and conf testing and no conf. Because most of the people use, as evident by data, use Selenium for test automation. And interestingly, if we combine the first two, right? 76 plus 20 is what? 96? Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm bad at maths. But still, of everybody present over here, 96% people use Selenium for test automation, functional, non-functional, right? So that's the point. That being said, let's go to a small story. So once upon a time, many, many years ago, a very wise engineer named Jason Huggins, he started this whole thing. He started the fire to automate his own timesheets. So I haven't written the full story. It would get boring. I'm not the best teller of stories, but you can catch him around and then hear it from his mouth directly. So that is how this whole thing started. It actually didn't start for test automation. It started for timesheets. Now, interesting, none of us love timesheets, and he figured out a solution. So that's how Selenium started. And that also segues into the next point. If you go to the Selenium website, selenium.dev, the first section is like big and bold. I think there's a reason that's the biggest heading on any web page. So it says Selenium automates web browsers. That's it. Now what you do with it is totally up to you, right? It's like you get the infinity gauntlet which Thanos had, and whether you want to decimate the world or do some other magic, that's totally up to you. So that's the point of having that powerful tool. Okay. We'll warm up with some non-functional test cases, non-functional testing use cases, so that we are on similar pages before we actually dive into the main topic of not using Selenium for test automation. Okay. So I haven't put up like a full demo for this. Most of you would have seen this in many, many ways earlier. This is a screen recording. What we are seeing on the screen is a JMeter instantiation to do non-functional testing / performance testing for a website. So it's a small implementation of the WebDriver script to open the selenium.dev homepage. From there, it goes to the conference page, measures the transaction, And then in a second or so, maybe 2 seconds or so, we will see that it will show the results in the results tree. And then we can see that the whole transaction took around 11914 seconds. So this has been there since, I don't know, the dark ages. So everybody would be an expert, would have seen this. One of our friends, Roger, gave a very detailed talk around using Selenium for performance testing. So you should look it up. There's a very nice DSL as well available for it. So I'll not spend too much time over here. Move on to more non-testing use cases. Now this is where things start to get interesting, so to say. You can use not only Selenium / I have used Selenium not only for site administration. So we were doing content management system for one of our platforms. We use Selenium to validate whether the links worked or not, whether the content was appropriate or not on a properly rendered web browser. Not like one of those fake availability checks. We also used it for SEO. I'll also quickly show you how you can use Selenium for doing some fake traffic for the websites. Obviously, everybody knows we can use Selenium for web scraping. Naomi gave a very nice talk around it yesterday. And then last but not the least, deals shopping. So I'm from India. We are really scrappy about these things. And we have these flash deals. I'm not sure how many of you know about it. So that, that deal opens for a very limited time. You have to go on that website, place an order, or that's gone. So me being that automation / engineer / scrappy Indian, did some of that automation using Selenium as well. Pretty successful. I owe my phone to that script. Okay. That being said, let's look at some examples. Too much talking, let's look at some code. Okay, first of all, how many people over here use Selenium with Python? Like give me a hey, hi, how, whatever. Any Pythonistas in the house? 1, 2. Okay, 2.5, I'm half. Like my Python is pretty bad. So let's look at that, okay. Okay, so what I'm using over here is a PyNotebook offered by Google Colab. Again, this is like a pretty simple script. So if we look at the first section of the script, nothing too complicated. It's just setting up the container, the Chromium, and the Debian environment for running the scripts. The second section is also pretty simple to understand. Line number 9 is we are setting up the driver, the web driver. Line number 16 is setting up a method to get the page source. So I'll quickly run these two. So first, on that Google Colab, running that to set up the environment, finished in 2 seconds. That is what I love about Google Colab. Then we'll do the second one, wherein we're not only setting up web driver, we are hitting a website, I think it's example.com, and then getting the HTML for it. So that would run, and under 11 seconds, we actually see that nicely formatted HTML. Pretty simple use case, can be done in Java, any other language. For simplicity, I had it done in Python. Now just imagine the power of this or the magnificence, wherein you can hit a website and scrape details off of it, right? Plus, this could be in Google Colab, so you can have multiple scripts running in parallel, so the scale is not a concern. And then also at the same time, this same thing can be used for deals shopping, SEO, so on and so forth, whatever examples I was giving earlier. Now, while this might look like theory, interestingly, I was talking to Joe Colantino, if I'm pronouncing that right, yesterday, and he mentioned that he actually used Selenium to get the number of viewers on his show for the platform, because that didn't have the API to provide the number of viewers. But he had to get the number every day, so he automated that use case. Pretty similar to this. I'm not sure if it was Python or not, but the same story. Okay, so that is one example that we saw. And the other one is web traffic. I think all of us understand that Selenium can be used to hit websites and generate some web traffic, right? But again, what I've done over here is that I've tried to implement that same thing using Python in Google Colab. So that's the other example. Again, the first section is all about setting up the Debian and Chromium environment in the cloud. That's done under 2 seconds. The next one is the interesting part. I'll just click play and then explain as we move around. So line 17 or so are about setting the driver. Line 19 is where the interesting stuff happens. So we are hitting a website called proxies.org, sslproxies.org, to actually get proxies from the internet. so that we can use those proxies and hit an endpoint, testzeus.com, which is the website which I run, to actually generate traffic for that. Now, while this can be used in positive sense, you can hit a website and see whether it's working or not, check out the SEO, the tracking, GTM, so on and so forth. If you're inclined towards the dark arts, maybe you can run it in parallel over multiple instances, have a huge amount of traffic directed to that website. Suddenly, boom, your link is like number one. Google is happy about it, you are happy about it. Maybe the marketing team gives you a small price. But at the cost of, unethical practices. So that is also run, and there were two proxies which I have used over here. Now, interestingly, the line which I have highlighted, I'm not sure it's big enough or not. I'll just make it slightly bigger. So if you look at the array of proxies that we get, is pretty huge. And again, this is coming from sslproxies.org, which gets periodically refreshed. So you can run this day in, day out for the entire, shopping weekend, so that your website is at the top, your product is at the top, so on and so forth. I'm not saying I've done this earlier, but maybe I have. So back to the slides. Okay. So it is all, happy, hunky-dory, as they say over here till now. But interestingly, everybody goes to that one meeting, and you meet like the villain of your life, right? So interestingly, I was also called to one of those meetings, and our Oracle finance team head, they said, okay, Robin, you could do this, do that. Wow, yeah, I can do it. Can you automate this invoicing and expensing process? And I'm like, yeah, it's in Excel. We can use libraries. I could do it in the night. However, I didn't notice that at the top, there is this small thing called Oracle ADFDI. I think it's in yellow, and it has buttons over and above the rows, right? So that is where things got really interesting for us and my team. We had to automate the whole process of getting the invoices and expenses, validating them versus the backend, sending out emails. I'm already feeling tired by explaining all that. So we looked at a couple of options. This is not very old, so this story goes back 2017 or so, 2018. And then we looked at options like CQLi, AutoIT, and many, many more. But what we realized that, see, I'm not designing this for me. It is to be done by the engineering team, who were already an expert in Selenium. So we were looking at a tool which could help us achieve that motto. And that is where Robin found my Robin, the Sidekick WinApp Driver. So that tool, interestingly, provides a very simple DSL to interact with the Windows desktop objects, namely Oracle ADFDI plugin on top of Excel, right? So what it does is, it has a very simple design, wherein you can write your code in Java, Python, .NET. It has bindings for all of them. And then in your preferred environment, talks to the Appium server, which interestingly has implementations for Selenium and WinApp Driver. So WinApp Driver then talks to the Windows COM objects, right? And that is how it went. The other cool thing which I loved about WinApp Driver was this line, right? So if we take examples, on the first diagram, you see that you have the slides as an object, just like a website, and then you have the title slide, like let's say the first slide. And using Microsoft accessibility tools, you can actually inspect that, just like you would do for an XPath. And then not only interrogate it, you can write commands, like how we have over here. You can create a session, find element by name, and whatever that name is for that accessibility shortcut. That is where it really hit off for us, and we could automate that entire flow, okay? I'll quickly show a quick demo as well, as long as I get it working, and hopefully it is working and not dated now. Okay, so that's Eclipse. So what we are doing in lines 34 to 51 is setting up an Appium session for WinApp Driver on the local. Now this same thing can be done at the server end also, but that is something slightly gray, which we'll cover later in the session. There is an after class wherein we actually, try to kill or get rid of whatever we've done, and then the actual test, for example. So we are trying to open Excel, find the button for File tab. There would be a file, journal entry.xlsx. That is what it was called at that time, and still, I'm assuming. Types in a few elements, and then kills excel.exe. So let's run this and see what happens. And hopefully it runs. So this is all in Java. TestNG is the runner over there. All of this can be implemented in other languages as well. Okay, so that is how it triggers Excel on the local, and then clicks on that one file, and then on that one row writes a welcome message for us over here at the Selenium conference. Now, this can be done not just for the rows and the columns over here. Interestingly, the same script or similar one can be used to automate the entire UI for any object on the Windows platform. And when I say any object, this could be Excel, PowerPoint, email, Chrome, browser, Notepad, so on and so forth. I think you get the story. You're a small and smart bunch. Okay, back to this. One small note over here, WinApp Driver is an open source library. It was powered by Microsoft and its team members who have gone a little sleepy on the project. But nonetheless, the same team has started another project called Wyvern App Driver, which uses similar bindings and similar DSL to automate Windows objects. So all hope is not lost. Now we can extend these same sample use cases across various industries. So that is the key point over here, right? For example, on sales, right, can we do the invoice management process? On banking, can we do the checking of the KYC, know your customer flow, or for that matter, underwriting, or execution of trades. And then on healthcare, electronic record and data management, or appointment bookings. Or if you're scrappy like me, maybe deals on an Amazon website, right? Now, interestingly, let's try to summarize this, right? Now that you have the infinity stones and the gauntlet, right? While you can use that same power, Selenium and its sibling technologies like Appium or WinApp Driver or Wyvern App Driver or libraries for OpenCV, computer vision, or APIs and emails and SMS, the point is there are infinite possibilities to automate the whole end-to-end process of any flow, right? But at the same time, we need to be mindful of server-side execution. Things can get real flaky when you run this as part of a Jenkins CI/CD job on a machine somewhere out in the remote world. We don't need to overfit the function. So we don't need to use Selenium for everything. Interestingly, I didn't realize pretty late in my career that we have APIs for a lot of things. So we could use APIs to do some of this. And then please factor in the operating cost. What is the cost of maintenance, and does it actually justify the ROI? Now, at that same moment, I'm not pretty sure how much of us know about the RPA tools like Automation Anywhere, UiPath, Blue Prism. If any of you have seen any of these platforms or tools, they do actually the same thing, but at a hefty price. I have total respect for them, but interestingly, whatever these tools achieve can be achieved by open source technologies as well, namely Excel, SMS, web, desktop automation, and not just like pieces, but the whole end-to-end flow. So the point is, what is an RPA platform, right? If you look at it very closely, RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. And what is testing for us? Isn't it a process? So if we look at the big body, RPA, isn't testing like a nuanced implementation of RPA for your testing use cases, right? So that being said, now that you guys have understood how we can use these infinity stones to build your own gauntlet, all of you, I'm pretty sure, are already RPA engineers, not just QA and automation engineers. There's this one thing which I've realized in my career, and on a closing note, Mr. Bruce Lee, I'm pretty sure, that Bruce Lee has said that, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Why have I put up this slide? Interestingly, what I've seen in the industry amongst us is that a lot of us talk about these various tools, you know, Selenium and Playwright or WebDriver IO, so on and so forth, and the list never ends. But nobody cares about real mastery in one thing. The point being, if you go deep into one ecosystem, one tool, let's say you go real deep into Selenium, Appium, and its siblings, the possibilities are really infinite if you gain real mastery on that one tool. That being said, small and simple, thank you. We have the QR code over here, which has the code examples. which also has resources for whatever presentation I have done, and here are my coordinates. Any questions, concerns? I also have chocolates from India to give. 3. So early birds get the prize.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robin.
Thank you so
that was
much.
so much
Yeah.
fun. A couple quick announcements before we move to questions here. There are a couple of folks, Tamir and Jessica, who signed up for lightning talks, and we have not seen you at the registration desk. If you are in here, please go visit Bill at the registration desk so that you can do your lightning talk next. But let's have some questions for Robin here.
Please, easy questions. Tough is also welcome.
Got any questions?
Yeah. There's one gentleman.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It's like staring into a light. I couldn't see you.
Hi.
Hi.
Are you aware of any drivers for Mac OS as well?
Wow, interesting. Yes and no. So interestingly, Mac OS has their own implementation for desktop automation. I think it's called Robot or something, but that's done by Apple themselves. Funny enough that you asked, because that use case came for us as well. So we had to do the same thing on Windows, but a similar one on Mac, right? So what we did was that at that point we just gave up and then moved on to technologies like OpenCV and just figuring out that element on the screen and trying to click on it. Just that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chocolate.
Are there any limitations that you have seen while using WinApp Driver?
Oh yeah, 100%. There were many limitations. I think I've lost some of the hair on my head due to them. So first and foremost, as I mentioned, server-side execution is really painful. For example, whenever WinApp Driver tries to locate the COM or the objects on the screen, it actually needs a screen. But when you're running it on a server, there is no screen, sadly, right? So what we had to do was ensure that one, we had to set up XVFB to render that. 2, that persistent connection with WinApp Driver and Appium should be maintained. And 3, at that time, generally again this goes back to when I started my career, don't touch the server machine. Don't try to do anything on it. If there's an admin, boot them out so that it runs happily and flawlessly. So this reminds me of the days 2009 or so. We had QTP, Quick Test Pro by HP running on a machine, and we had a post-it note. It said, do not touch. Test automation running. So yeah, definitely limitations, and yeah, while we are so advanced, we are still running behind. Yeah, thank you, Roger.
Hi, Robin.
Yes, sir.
This WinApp driver is used for only Windows applications or Windows apps also. Can we use this WinApp driver with Appium?
Anything. Thank you, ma'am. WinApp driver, as the name suggests, anything. So could be a WPF, could be a WinUI form, could be an app, could be something from the Microsoft Store. Anything which is there on Windows can be handled by WinApp driver. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
So you mentioned there's kind of a point where you might use built-in APIs as opposed to WinApp driver. Is there any point or a guideline that you follow where you say, okay, although I'm familiar with WinApp driver, I should use the built-in APIs to test this?
Yeah. So it actually is driven by a lot of these things, right? So if you just zoom out, it's not like I'm going to code day in, day out. It's my team. So they should be aware and comfortable about those APIs. The second point is, as I said, if we are running these on the server, what are the constraints of that machine? And then third is the application itself. For something mundane like, let's say, Excel, this would be a pretty happy path to follow. But if you are, let's say, in a development phase of a WPF application or a WinUI form, maybe target the APIs more so from the UI angle. So try to follow that pyramid somehow, somewhere, happily. Yeah. Thank you.
We got any more questions? Oh, yeah.
So thank you. So just a quick question regarding the actual execution of WinApp Driver. So can you, I might have missed it, but can you expand more about the actual CI/CD part of it? Do you run it using Jenkins? Do you schedule it? Like how do you run it? And then how much manual intervention do you have to deal with, if any?
Okay. Sure. Okay. Let me just boil down a lot of things into 3 bullet points. Okay. So one is ensure that that machine is not just set up, it has a consistent XVFB connection to your local so that it can actually pop up like a screen. It can actually pop up Excel, right? So that we can identify the elements. That is one. 2, to ensure that is happening, Windows has something called, I think, a task scheduler or something. So it's a built-in program which can be used to trigger that and start the Appium server and the WinApp driver.exe file. Once those are done, please time it correctly with your Jenkins execution. It's not like, before these are being triggered, you trigger the test case. So we have to synchronize them. Once these are triggered, and let's say 30 minutes later or 5 minutes later is when you trigger something from Jenkins, and then it would happily execute. So that's how we go about it. But that synchronization is really important. Or else something would start, but that service is not there. Maybe it's trying to hit it, element not found exception because Excel has not started yet, so on and so forth. Thank you.
Any other questions? Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, thank you all so much for attending Raman's talk. I thought it was really interesting and very cool, and you had a lot of great energy. Next up is lightning talks in here at 2:45. Thank you.
Yeah.